if any of you are there yet.
Did you find it helpful last week when Sam was texting you directly when people had questions and you could talk about them?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think there was only one instance or something, but yeah. Oh, where's Suncast? What's going on here? Normally it says Suncast is logged in.
I don't know, but Sam texted me earlier that everything was good on that end.
So. All right, good.
Okay.
Oh, my beard looks really splotchy.
It looks fine.
Here we go.
Just look at it on the Three, two, one. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are. It's a lot darker this week at 5:02 than it was when we started the show last week at 5:02, thanks to the geniuses who came up with daylight savings time. Are we ever going to get rid of that in my lifetime? Daylight savings time? I've talked to the farmers, right? Because that's what everybody says. Oh, it's the farmers, for the farmers. I've talked to the farmers. The farmers are fine. Don't worry. We can stick with not doing daylight savings time and screwing everybody's body clock and internal clock up a couple of times a year. That's it. I'm done with daylight savings time. That's my rant for the week. And we'll stick to hockey for the most part, though. My name's Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. We're coming to you live on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, hockeyprimetime.com. And streaming on Facebook Live. Hello, everybody watching us on Facebook Live or on Periscope. Laura Saba is here with me. Hello, Laura.
Hi. I have not thawed out yet from 2 days ago. It's gotten really cold.
It was -7. Well, what are you?
It was -16 last night when I was running all my errands. I think I'm still frozen.
Oh, come on. It's I don't know. Sounds like you better get yourself ready because the worst is yet to come. I mean, this is nothing. I think it was like -1 today. I mean, people are complaining, but geez, give it a little more time. It's going to be terrible. January, remember January?
Yeah, I feel like it's like this transition part. It feels really cold, but like this time in the spring, as soon as it's -1, it's going to be so warm. People
sweatshirt weather. Yeah. It's and if you're like a frat bro from McGill, it's tank top weather, right?
With flip flops.
Yeah, totally. But no, it's all about perspective. But yeah, we will be longing for days like this in the months of January, February, and March, which is an underratedly horrible month in Montreal. At least it has been the last couple of years. So yes, a very exciting time here in Montreal, where Hockey Primetime comes to you live every week from the Hockey Primetime studio in the heart of St. Henry in the Southwest Borough. We elected, it was exciting, elected a new mayor in Montreal last week, and the Habs played on Sunday night. They had a really nice performance against the Chicago Blackhawks. Went in there, they shut them out, and you got this feeling of, wow, maybe this team really is turning the corner. They were down 4-2, and you're always looking for it, and maybe you don't want to put too much stock into any one game. But once you see a couple of games, a 3-game winning streak, which is what they were on before Thursday when they lost to Minnesota, but Saturday night down 4-2 in the third period at Winnipeg, it's a tough situation. Winnipeg's playing some good hockey. Boom, they come back, they tie it up, they win it in overtime, and Max Pacioretty gets off the schneid on the power play. First power play goal in like 40 games or something, right? For Max Pacioretty, first power play goal in 40 games. So a lot of optimism. Next night, they go into Chicago. They're not going to beat Chicago. Carey Price is injured. No, they go out.
Second night of a back-to-back,
Yes.
which usually is really tough on them.
They beat Chicago 2-0. They shut them out. It was their first time beating Chicago. I think, I'm trying to remember. I don't want to screw this up. I believe it was the first time they beat Chicago since back in 2002 in Chicago. And again, you know, you always come up with these stats for Eastern teams. They don't go out to those buildings very often, which is why sometimes they can go 15 years. I remember the Canadians haven't won in San Jose since 1999.
And they still have not won.
That's right. Yeah. So Stefan Quintal scored the game-winning goal that day back in 2002. Now the head of player safety in the NHL. And then Tuesday night they do it again. They look okay. They pick up a W, and then along comes Thursday. They get the Minnesota Wild back for the second time in a week. And you're thinking, well, all right, a week ago they played Minnesota. They lost 6-3. They were terrible. Carey Price gave up 5 goals on 26 shots. Horrendous performance by Montreal. Hey, here's a chance, right? They've won 3 games in a row. They just beat Chicago. They just beat Winnipeg. Winnipeg had just beaten Minnesota. I mean, I understand, you know, you don't want to start applying that kind of logic, but maybe you'd think they could go with them. And yes, I understand that there were injuries and there were other factors that people blamed the loss on. But once again, it just felt like the bubble burst, like all the optimism that had gathered, whatever optimism had gathered around this team over the course of that 1 week period from Thursday to Thursday, or really from Saturday to Thursday, just evaporated and popped and was gone. Or maybe you're the type who says, nah, you know, they got jobbed in that game. They had 2 goals disallowed by the referees in somewhat, I guess, arguable fashion, but really can see it. You could look at it from both ways. They were without their number 1 defenseman. They were without their number 1 center, and they were without their number 1 goalie, right? That's a lot. That's a lot to overcome for any team, especially in this era. But I still do think, and we'll see those guys back tonight. They're going to have Jonathan Drouin back tonight. They're going to have Shea Weber back tonight. At least I believe that's what I'm hearing. No Carey Price, though. He's been placed on injured reserve by the Canadians. That's a retroactive placement, so I think he'll be available this week if he's good to go. And more on that in a minute. But there really is a feeling of 1 step forward, 2 steps back for this Montreal team. They put themselves in a hole early on, and they're trying to claw their way out of it. And right, that was a chance on Thursday to get back to 500 for the first time this year, first time since opening night, when they beat Buffalo and were 1 game above 500. So the first time since a couple of games into the season, and they weren't able to seize it. So you can look at the referees, and you can look at this, and you can look at that, but ultimately, I think you are what your record is. You are the performance that you put up there, and you're not going to tell me there aren't teams in the NHL that have dealt with crippling and devastating injuries this year. Hey, how about the Leafs? They beat last night. They took care of business. What a play in overtime by Mitch Marner to set up Patrick Marleau, the aging vet who looks like he's experiencing a little bit of a fountain of youth situation there in Toronto. But every team experiences adversity. How about the Ottawa Senators without Erik Karlsson for the first, 6 games this year? And he certainly made up for lost time since coming back. But the Sens were winning games without Erik Karlsson. Every team is going to have to win games in which their lineup is not complete. And in some cases, you are going to be without your number 1 goalie, your number 1 D, and your number 1 center. And I'm not saying you got to win all those games, but don't forget, Minnesota had played the night before. They played against Toronto, so they were coming off a back-to-back. That's a situation where they were on the road for both of those games. Montreal's at home. Minnesota's playing a back-to-back. Those are reasons to like Montreal. So the scale sort of tips both ways. I was unimpressed with that performance by Montreal on Thursday night, and again I'm waiting to get optimistic about this team. I spend and if you haven't heard or you're unaware of what I do the rest of the time that I'm not doing this, other than having a great time, is I host the morning show on TSN Radio in Montreal. So and that's a 4-hour show every day. And we spend a lot of time talking about the Canadians. And believe me, it's a lot more fun to talk about a team that's winning games and not being negative and talking about why things are going so wrong, and trying to constantly sort of generate buzz around a team that right now is just every time something good happens, something bad happens. So here they are. They're back to work tonight. They should win this game. They got the Buffalo Sabres at the Bell Center. It's the Nathan Beaulieu return to Montreal, right?
Do you think there'll be a 2-minute video?
Beaulieu had some moments for the Habs over his years. They could use a guy like Nathan Beaulieu on that blue line, but no, of course, takes something to get a tribute video, I think, in this market. But no, it's the kid's going to be highly motivated. He mentioned it. He told reporters this week that it was a game that he had circled as soon as the schedule came out. When after the Canadiens traded him for like a 3rd-round draft pick or whatever it was, just an NHL defenseman who had 28 points last year, traded away for a 3rd-round draft pick and not replaced. Just strange summer of management by Marc Bergevin. So anyway, 1 step forward, 2 steps back. That's sort of how it feels for me. But as we mentioned, they're getting help. They won't have Carey Price, but they will have Shea Weber and Jonathan Drouin. And the other thing that we keep hearing, and I did want to mention this, is that Montreal, I know the Corsi crowd, and I know we've got a lot of friends in the Corsi crowd, and I'm sure there's some people in the Corsi crowd that are listening tonight, and that's fine. I got no problem with the Corsi crowd. Good people, smart people, computer people. But I don't want to hear about the Canadian shot totals anymore and how they're out shooting teams. It's enough with this already. This is Claude Julien. This is what the Boston Bruins were under Claude Julien. They would outshoot teams consistently. The Corsi crowd, the advanced stats people, they loved him. They loved the Bruins. They love Claude Julien. I think we've got a big enough sample size of Julien's end in Boston and beginning in Montreal to say that his system creates shot disparities. It creates eye-pleasing and attractive shot numbers. The Canadiens consistently outshoot opponents. They rank among the top teams in the NHL in shots on goal, but at some point, you got to take a long, hard look at the quality of those shots. And there's a lot of right into the chest protector type shots. A guy's shooting from the corner. You see Brendan Gallagher took a shot on goal from the corner. I was looking at a shot chart the other night. The guy he's behind the net. He's in the corner. And I understand that you've got Devin Dubnyk. It's a goalie who's struggled a little bit this year, has a little bit of trouble with pucks down low, but it's a highly optimistic, but that's still, it's a shot. It hit Dubnyk, right? So I enough with if they keep doing this, they're going to start having success. No, they're not. I really don't think so. If they get Carey Price back and if they start scoring some goals, yes, but I don't want to hear about the shot totals anymore. They're not taking it to teams where we don't see sustained dominance. We just see a lot of shots on goal. Excuse me. So that's it. No more Corsi talk about how good the Canadiens are at generating shots and how everything's going to be fine as a result of that. What's going on with Carey Price? That's the last thing I wanted to mention here before we move on to other topics. And I know we've talked pretty much all about the Canadiens. That's kind of what we do here on the show. I open with the Canadiens. I do my sort of rant and monologue about the Montreal Canadiens. And then we go on to other stuff. Today, we're going to talk about the Penguins. We're going to go around the NHL. We'll get to the Penguins, the Devils, the Sens, the Blues. What a start for the St. Louis Blues, and plenty more in the first hour or so of the show. But Carey Price and the rumors. And if you're not here in Montreal, you don't know about the rumors about Carey Price. Carey Price, 30 years old. He's been married now for a couple of years. He's been with his wife, Angela, as his wife, and then before that for a very long time. I think 13 years or something like that. And he's got a kid. He's got a daughter named Liv. And his life right now, according to a lot of people, is sort of blowing up. And I don't, and none of the people who I've heard it from are people who I would rely on for anything resembling a reliable news or analysis, but tons of rumors about Carey Price. And I think the funniest thing is I hear some stuff from people I know, people who I trust, tell me, wow, something's going on with Carey Price. Off-ice stuff. There's some off-ice stuff going on with Carey Price, right? Because we don't know what the injury is. The team says the injury, he's hurt, lower body. not related to the knee injury he suffered a couple of years ago. But that's it. That's all the details we get. No time frame. Oh, is he skating? No, he's not skating. Oh, now he's skating in equipment. Oh, now he's on injured reserve. And, of course, we have this traumatic experience of 2 years ago when the Canadians completely bungled the handling of Carey Price's injury, stringing everybody along for months before finally admitting he was done and shutting him down for the season, right? So there's that sort of trauma in the back of people's minds, and they're just waiting for that. But the broken telephone and the rumors I just find to be hilarious. I don't know what's true. I don't think you know what's true, Laura.
No, I don't.
And whatever. I don't. Maybe he really is just hurt. I mean, it's possible. Unfortunately, the Canadians probably don't deserve a ton of benefit of the doubt based on their history of handling different things and handling injuries. But it is very funny to me that I'll hear one thing from somebody who I trust, somebody who I'd consider a source, but not, again, I'm not comfortable. It's not what I do. I'm not going on the air talking about guys' personal lives. That's just not what I believe my job is. And I think that there's a line I'm not willing to cross.
I agree.
There's other people that are willing to cross it. I'm not willing to cross it. But the best is that I'll hear something, and it's like, it's not a good, it's something about Carey Price. It's not great. It's not a good look, but at the same time, I mean, is it in a way, I mean, if you have an off-ice problem, you'd hope that it's sort of, you could recover from it faster than you can a torn ACL, right? That would be a glass half full way of looking at it. But then 2 days later, I'll be talking to a friend, and he's like, "Oh man, did you hear about Carey Price? I was in, playing hockey last night in the locker room, and somebody told me," and it's this like super exaggerated, way crazier version of the rumor that I heard.
You heard from the beginning.
And it really is just this sort of like classic case of broken. It's what it is. Broken telephone. We all played this when we were kids in school or camp or wherever. Broken telephone. That's this phenomenon in a nutshell. Anyway, the way that all this goes away, there's a very simple answer. Carey Price gets back on the ice, stops some pucks, and starts winning some games for the Canadians. I have no idea what's going on with Carey Price. Stop asking me. Coming up next, Andy Strickland. Let's talk St. Louis Blues. Andy joins us next. How about the Blues, man? Wow. They're one win away from their best start in franchise history. They've got who could forget Paul Kariya's storied career with the Blues? We'll tee up his entry into the Hall of Fame. All that and more coming up during the next segment of Hockey Primetime. Let's talk St. Louis Blues on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com, and video on Facebook Live, Periscope, YouTube Live, and probably something else too. We'll be right back. Who has great hair? Who comes to mind?
30 seconds, and Andy's there.
Great.
The Red Sox player. I always butcher his name.
Johnny Damon?
No. He's a current Red Sox player. Who else has great hair?
Dustin Pedroia.
Dustin Pedroia, eh?
Dustin Pedroia.
Is that who you were thinking of?
No, he's bald.
Yeah, okay, yeah, right.
Here we go.
3, 2, 1. Hello. Good evening. This is Hockey Primetime. Nice to be back with you. My name's Conor McKenna. With the producer of the program here. Her name is Laura Saba. And let's talk a little bit about the St. Louis Blues, man. 13 wins in 7 games. So what a start. And let's talk a little bit about the best team in the Western Conference so far this season with our friend Andy Strickland from Fox Sports Midwest. Andy, how you doing?
Connor, good to be with you, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man, and nice to hear your voice again. Just a pretty amazing start, and I'm not sure if I'm off with this, but I believe the Blues, if they win tonight, they're facing the Islanders. It would qualify as either the best or tie the best start in franchise history. How much of a surprise is it that they've been this good?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a surprise when you look at the injuries they had, Connor. I mean, you go back to training camp and you pretty much lose, a full line, if you will. I mean, you lose Robbie Fabry for the full season with that ACL injury after he missed most of last season with an ACL. Nobody saw that coming. They entered training camp knowing they weren't going to have Patrick Berglund. He had off-season shoulder surgery. They knew that around July 1st, around free agency. Zach Sanford is a guy nobody really talks about. He's a guy who came over in the Kevin Shattenkirk deal. Certainly would have been, at least factored into being a top 9 player for this hockey club. So, they were a little bit in scramble mode, trying to find pieces to put together to try to give them some type of depth offensively. The good news is right now, Jaden Schwartz is playing like a top 3 player in the National Hockey League. I mean, he's been that good. They didn't know how good Braden Shen would be in terms of how he'd fit in with this hockey club, and he's been a huge relief for this team just in terms of how he's come in and settled in and played with Jaden Schwartz and really solidified what is one of the top lines in the National Hockey League alongside, Vladimir Tarasenko and Schwartz. So I don't think they knew exactly what they had, to be honest with you. I thought they knew they'd be good. Petrangelo's played as well as any defenseman in the National Hockey League, and they've gotten goaltending. So if you have goaltending, you have a legitimate number 1 defenseman, a true superstar, and Tarasenko, and obviously a number 1 offensive line. You're going to give yourself a chance every single night, and that's what's happened so far.
You mentioned how good Jaden Schwartz has been, and this is a guy who's been a good NHL player for a long time. He's been a solid offensive producer, but now an elite offensive producer, at least so far this season. What do you hear from him? What are your impressions of why he's just sort of taken, I don't know if he's taken just 1 step, maybe taken 2 steps this year?
Well, I think this is what people expected, at least internally with the organization. From Jaden Schwartz from the time he was drafted. I saw him play in the USHL several years ago, and he was hands down the best player in that league. He led the league in scoring. He was a dominating player on his team. And you can't always translate how a player plays in the USHL to the National Hockey League, and that's not where I'm going here. But, he took that to Colorado College, where he was a great player in college. He had 28 goals a couple of years ago, so you knew that, he could put the puck in the net, and certainly at a young age was finding his way in the NHL. Connor, what happened to him was injury. He had a couple of devastating injuries and real fluke injuries that took place in practice with limited contact. I mean, one of them was just a warm-up drill where he blew a tire and went into the post, not even going fast at all. I mean, it was, in the first 5 minutes of a practice, in a warm-up drill, like I said, and he just goes into the post and shatters his ankle. Talking to Schwartz recently, he tells me he still isn't 100% in his mind. He's still playing with multiple screws inside his ankle. But, last year and the year before, he was still trying to find his way from a health standpoint. When he's on his game, he's one of the quickest players, not one of the fastest players, but one of the quickest players in the NHL in small areas. His quick change of direction, his stops and starts, his pull-ups, his ability to make plays coming out of a pull-up, I think is what separates him from a lot of players in the National Hockey League. I mean, he can really separate himself down low, escape coverage. And for a small player, he's one of the best in the National Hockey League offensively at protecting the puck. So he can hang on to it. And again, he's got great hockey sense. He knows where to go without the puck, puts himself in position to score. But he's got a ton of natural natural ability. I mean, he set records playing at Notre Dame High School in Saskatchewan back in the day before he ever even went and played college hockey and played in the USHL. So this guy was a big-time elite phenom project coming into junior hockey, and now he's all of a sudden healthy, and he's starting to show, I think, what a lot of people believed he could be when he was drafted.
We're talking Andy Strickland about the St. Louis Blues from Fox Sports Midwest. They're taking on the New York Islanders tonight as they look for their 14th win in their first 18 games of the season this year. Jaden Schwartz, Braden Shen, Vladimir Tarasenko, I heard you referring to that earlier. And I think with Shen, it's interesting too, right? Because not only are we seeing Schwartz as you're saying here, Andy, sort of living up to the potential that I think a lot of people, I guess you're saying, people like you and people in St. Louis, people in that organization knew he had. Braden Shen at one point was thought of as maybe the best player not playing in the National Hockey League when he was a member of the Los Angeles Kings organization before he was traded. I don't want to screw this up. I believe it was in the Mike Richards trade all those years ago. He spent quite a while in Philly, and now he's a member of the Blues. Hopes are always high, and he was always a good NHLer, but it seems like he's sort of realizing that potential now in St. Louis as well, and it happens to be coinciding with Schwartz. So is that a fair assessment?
Well, I think it's a fair assessment, and you're right. He did go over to Philadelphia, and that is part of that Mike Richards deal. But sometimes it's just finding the right combination and the right chemistry. He and Schwartz had chemistry together from day one at training camp. I mean, I remember watching them in the first time I ever saw them skate together in a practice, and you could see it right away, Connor. And, he had chemistry with guys like Wayne Simmons and some other players, obviously, in Philadelphia. You look at the number of power play goals he scored. I think he had 17 power play goals last year that led the National Hockey League's at least tie with Alexander Ovechkin. Now he's getting it done at even strength. The biggest question mark for Braden Shen, I think, internally coming into the season was, how would he be able to transition into being a centerman? That's the position that he wanted to play in. Philadelphia primarily used him on the wing. He always wanted to play center. He was a natural center coming into the National Hockey League, so he felt a little bit out of place playing on the wing, but he was never a natural distributor or a natural puck mover, and wasn't a great playmaker, So, a lot of times you want to see your centerman, have the ability to make plays. I think that's been the biggest surprise for the coaching staff, and certainly for those of us who have watched him on a game-in and game-out basis, is how well he sees the ice and his ability to make plays. I think everyone looked at him as just a shooter, and the fact that he could shoot the puck, putting himself in position to get open and score in a variety of different ways. He's good around the net, but he also has a release where he could score from at least 10 to 15 feet out. We saw that in Philadelphia. Now he's making plays. He's playing that quick two-man game with Schwartz. He plays below the dots. He plays below the goal lines. He's got character. He's got some physical to his game. So he brings an element the Blues didn't have. And let's face it, Yori Laterra went to Philadelphia as part of that deal. And so I think from an upgrade standpoint, it certainly is a big-time one. When you look at the center position, he brings a lot more pace to his game than Laterra did, even though that wasn't a one-for-one deal. Philadelphia got a couple of first-round picks, and they certainly have, some players that they can plug in down the road as part of this deal. But again, I think people thought Braden Shen would be a good player. Did they think he'd be this good, this quick? I'm not so sure they thought that.
That's a hell of a line they've got there. All right, Andy, before we let you go here, one more thing I wanted to ask you about, and that's Paul Kariya, which a huge story this weekend. He's going into the Hall of Fame. I didn't realize that it was 3 seasons. He had an 82 game, a season in which he played all 82 games and had 65 points for the St. Louis Blues. It's sort of his last really productive offensive season, although 43 points in 75 games, not too shabby either 2 years after that. What do you remember of Paul Kariya, not just as a St. Louis Blue, but as a player and one who's about to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame?
Well, I was talking to John Kelly about this the other day, who called a lot of games for the Colorado Avalanche before he came over to St. Louis. And, of course, the Avalanche played a lot of games against, the Anaheim Mighty Ducks back then. And, he said something that was interesting. He said Kariya and Solani scored more goals off of defensive zone faceoffs than anyone else he's ever seen. I mean, they were pure speed, their ability to just blow the zone. And you talk about a true combo. I mean, Solani and Kariya were a true combo. I mean, we use other names that are out there, like Crosby and Malkin. And, you talk about a true combo. Curry and Gretzky, Solani and Kariya were just that, Hall and Oates. I mean, these guys played together every single game. and they were magical out there. You know, the thing about Paul Kariya when he came here and getting to know him a little bit is that he's got a great personality. He's a funny guy. He fit in well with the young guys and certainly fit in with the veterans as well. But, you know, he'd have young players over to his house for dinner. He did a ton of charity work, Connor, without anybody knowing, where he'd go visit kids in hospitals, never wanted people to know about it. And if people did find out about it and if they reported on it, he would get really upset about it. I mean, he wanted to be really under the radar from that standpoint. But a quick story, real quick. I'll never forget when the Blues signed him. I was headed down to a TV station to do a little report there on the Blues, and I got a phone call from John Davidson, and I didn't answer the call because I was about to go on camera, and he left a message, and he said, "Andy, we signed Kariya." And I listened to the message actually before I went on, called him back right away, and he was sitting in an office with Al McInnes and Larry Plow at the time, and they were excited. They signed him to a 3-year deal, $6 million per at the time when the Blues weren't very good. And that was a lot of money for the Blues to spend at the time. Did it work out from a St. Louis standpoint in terms of production, in terms of health? Probably not, but it gave them a superstar they could market, and it gave an opportunity for a lot of people here in St. Louis to get to know Paul Kariya, and I think people are better off because of it.
Andy, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay, take care, Connor.
That is Andy Strickland, Fox Sports Midwest on the St. Louis Blues. I didn't recall that it was that many games and that many years in St. Louis at the end for Paul Kariya. Really sort of I don't know if it's fair to say it's a sad story. I mean, you know, we hear enough sad stories every day that I don't know if we can talk about Paul Kariya being a sad story, but I'd say it is a great story. It is a really, really nice story that he is sort of back into not the spotlight, but into the mix, into the fold in the National Hockey League. One of the great players of the 90s and the especially early 2000s. And very cool to see him going into the Hall of Fame. Well-deserved and seems like if to hear Andy tell it and to hear everybody who knows the guy tell it, a Hall of Fame person in addition to being a Hall of Fame level hockey player. All right, so coming up next, what are we doing? We're talking to Jesse Spector. Ooh, the New Jersey Devils came flying out of the gates this year, but has the bubble burst? Have the Devils turned into a pumpkin? We'll talk to Jesse Spector and JDevils.com about that next. This is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Dun, 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 dun.
Okay, we're about 90 seconds away, and Jesse is there.
Thank you.
Did we figure out the Boston Red Sox with the nice hair?
Benintendi.
Ah, yes, he does have decent hair.
Yeah, I know. It's too obscure. You know what I mean? Like the guy. So look, my friend just got this crazy procedure done to like enhance his hair.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to break his balls and send him a GIF of like, is this what you look like now? And I was thinking like Steve from Stranger Things. I don't know if you watched that.
No, but I know who it is.
Or just go Wayne Rooney.
Yeah, right.
Or like a rock star with like crazy
Maybe. But I don't know. First of all, like I don't know what's going on with the GIF keyboard here on this iPhone, but like maybe
that's the thing that kept freezing?
Yeah, like the software. Oh, here we go. It's too late now, anyway.
You already answered it.
Basically, yeah.
Here we go.
3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome back. You're listening to Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, also live at hockeyprimetime.com. We're on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Periscope. So check us out, please, and feel free to join the conversation. You want to make a comment about anything at all? You know, hopefully it will be something nice. But hey, I mean, it's social media. I understand a lot of nastiness out there. You want to direct some of that at me? Absolutely. You can do it on our Facebook page at Hockey Primetime or our Twitter page at Hockey Primetime as well. Pleased to be hanging out with you this evening. What's going on with the New Jersey Devils? They're playing the Florida Panthers tonight at 7 o'clock. They're looking to avoid their 5th straight loss. What happened? The Devils came flying out of the gate. So much goodwill. They're a fun team to watch, which is also kind of weird. Let's find out what's going on with the Devils. Joining us right now from njdevils.com, the Devils' official website, amongst other publications, where you can read him. Jesse Spector back on the show. Jesse, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for making time for us here today. Is it weird that the Devils have played this many? I feel like they've played more entertaining games this year than they have in the last 5 years combined.
Oh, I think it's something that's been coming, and with the change of leadership a couple of years ago, and putting John Hines in as coach, he's got an entertaining style, and I think the last year they really just didn't have the personnel to play any kind of entertaining hockey, and now they do, and it's they've been using the slogan "Red Dawn," and it makes some sense. Coming out of last year, start of a new era for real with the #1 draft pick, Nico Hischier, and some talent around him as well as a couple of good rookies, and Jesper Bratt and Will Butcher. It's a new day in Jersey, so it's been exciting to watch them do this. I think the early success was something that was unexpected, and this losing streak has been one of those things that it happens, and I think that John Hines the other night said it pretty well that early on they maybe won some games that they shouldn't have won, and during this losing streak they've lost a couple of games that maybe they shouldn't have lost. They got pretty well walloped in Edmonton. They should have won that game in Calgary. Went to a shootout. Probably should have done better against the Blues and at least gotten that game to overtime. And then you run into the Oilers in a 3-on-3 situation, and Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl come up with a play with about 15 seconds to go before the shootout, and that was just a special goal that they put together there to end that game.
I was going to say the first of many, but we've already seen quite a few of those. Look, even despite the recent run of difficulty for the Devils, they still are first now in the Metropolitan Division. Is that at all surprising? I know the Rangers are coming on strong, but it's kind of weird, isn't it, that you got so many teams that are sort of flirting with 500 that are there in the Metropolitan Division, considered by many to be the strongest division in hockey?
Yeah, I think it is surprising is certainly a good way to put it in. And probably more so because it's not the Penguins or the Caps up top there. And those are two teams that you would expect to be at the top of the division. It's still early. I think, though, that the Devils have established themselves, the way that they play. They can be a playoff contender. I don't expect them to be a first-place team in this division all year long, but I think that they've shown enough, and they have a real good goaltender in Corey Schneider. They've got enough talent there to make something happen and make a playoff push.
And right now they sit at 9-4-2. They've played just 15 games, so 3 games in hand over the Rangers and Penguins, who also sit on 20 points through the season so far. And then you've got Columbus and Washington in the wild card spots, meaning that, and this season isn't going to end today, but if it did, that there'd be 5 Metro teams in the playoffs and just 3 from the Atlantic Division, which is, of course, the minimum that one division can send. And Tampa remains sort of the class of the conference based on the way things are going right now. 28 points, a plus 24 goal differential. Very impressive stuff from them, and more on that later on today. But the Devils, even if they didn't win that game the other night, Jesse, they had the Brian Boyle story, which certainly is a phenomenal one. This is a guy who's not just coming back from what he's come back from now. I mean, this is a guy who's his whole story is a remarkable one, but it was cool to see him get that one the other night, wasn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely was, and it's such a nice thing for me personally covering him. I covered him when he was with the Rangers, and then he signs with the Devils in the offseason, and I wind up coming on board with the Devils website to write some stories for them. And it was really exciting that I was going to have somebody there that I had a good relationship with going back, and he's one of the nicest guys in a sport full of nice guys. And then he gets this leukemia diagnosis, and it's just devastating. But 6 weeks later, to be back playing NHL hockey is amazing. And he scores a goal, and his celebration, I think, said it all. And he broke down in tears, and it was a special thing. And I think that the fact that it happened in front of a sellout crowd in Jersey, happened to be WWE night at the Rock, and it's not an arena that's always full this early in the season. And I think that when you have you're coming off a season like they had last year, you don't really expect a lot of excitement early in the year. So the way that it broke down, that they were able to have a sellout crowd there, and they've had two sellouts. They had a sellout against the Avs for the opener, and then that Calgary game. There's been some exciting moments already, and it was really great to see that the way that came together for Brian.
You mentioned the rookies, Nico Hischier, Will Butcher, the two, I guess, sort of most notable guys or most well-known guys. How's it going, Hischier? How would you rate his first 15 games in the NHL?
Yeah, I think the skill is definitely there, and what he's going through right now is a bit of an adjustment to playing with guys of NHL size, speed, and skill, and finding his footing as well. I think that there was a play that kind of showed a little bit of him being a deferential rookie the other night in overtime. He came down on a 2-on-1 with Taylor Hall, and I think everybody in the building expected that Hall was going to shoot that puck and try to win the game for the Devils. And Hall, including the Edmonton defenseman who was back there with him, expected that as well. So Hall passes over to Hischier, and Nico passes back and wound up passing behind Hall, and they had that chance go by the boards. And I think that, give him a little bit more experience and a little bit more reason to be confident in himself and what he can do in this league, and he takes that shot and maybe ends the game for him. I think that it's a bit more of an adjustment period than you have for a guy who isn't a teenager coming into the league. And sometimes that's something that you deal with when you're integrating a guy who's, not played any kind of AHL hockey or anything like that. He did play with adults in Europe, obviously, but it's a transition to the NHL. And I think that's what he's going through right now. And the skill, though, is definitely there. You can see the way that, he stick handles around guys. His vision of the ice is really good. The whole package is there. It's just got to take a little while to coalesce and come together for him.
Right, and yeah, it can't be an easy adjustment to make from any level to the NHL, right? And Will Butcher, probably some similarities there as well. Of course, different position, different player, a little bit older is Butcher, but I saw him do some pretty amazing things early on this season in some of the games that I watched. And again, I guess there's a little bit of a rookie adjustment there too, right? Are we seeing him sort of come down to earth after a bit of a dream start to his career?
I think a little bit, and I think that you're seeing that more at 5-on-5. The power play that he's been so successful in leading for them has gone dry lately, but I haven't seen that being the result of Will Butcher particularly struggling. It's just been a matter of goalies making stops, and that's one of the reasons that power plays fluctuate over the course of a season. I've thought, as I've watched, that the Devils have been really, really close to breaking this power play drought that they've been on, and it just hasn't come together for him in the last couple of games, and that's a tricky thing. But when you give Will Butcher the kind of open ice that he has on a power play, and that he'll continue to have because that's just the nature of power play, he can do some special things with the puck and find guys and set up plays really well. And I think that's something that's going to, even when he's maybe struggling a bit with the transition at 5-on-5, at that 5-on-4, he can continue to be a productive player for them, and I think that's something to lean on.
Terrible news about Travis Zajac back in August, and you never want to learn about a long-term injury in the month of August if you're an NHL player or an NHL team. But it sounds like he's getting closer to a return. What can you tell me about that?
Yeah, he's cleared to play medically, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get right back in the lineup immediately. He's going to have to go through some practices and such before he can get back in the lineup. I'm not sure, if we can use the Brian Boyle situation as any kind of comparison, but it was about a week and a half between Boyle being cleared medically and actually getting into the lineup. And then it's been as Boyle's gone, it's been a situation because he didn't have any preseason. It took him a little, that Western Canada trip to sort of get his legs under him. He was much better against the Blues, picked up an assist in that game, and then, obviously scored a goal. And it wasn't just the goal that he scored against Edmonton. He was much better. That was his best game throughout, and he was generating at the offensive end and playing the typical Brian Boyle kind of defensive forward role that you'd expect to see him play. And I think that he's close to being himself. So, yeah, that might be something similar to what we're looking at with Zajac, but it's something, you just got to monitor, because when a guy's coming back from an injury like that, it's you just got to watch and hope that everything continues to go well with it, because there can always be setbacks and you just don't know.
Jesse, thank you for your time as always. We appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me.
NJDevils.com. You can read his work. Follow him on Twitter at Jesse Spector. The Devils host the Florida Panthers tonight at 7 o'clock at The Rock, as you just heard from Jesse. And as we're going to see in a lot of rinks around the league in both Canada and the United States, a military appreciation night or some sort of a salute to those who serve on Veterans Day or Remembrance Day, wherever you're from. So coming up next, let's talk Ottawa Senators. What a sweet, did you feel the buzz of what do they call it? The Swedish, whatever. I don't know what they called it. Anyway, the Sens went and played 2 games in Sweden. They won both of them. How about Erik Karlsson? Wow. Guy's got 17 points in 11 games this year. He's a defenseman. Just amazing stuff. We'll check in with James Gordon of The Athletic, covering the Ottawa Senators right after this. You're listening to Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com, on Periscope, on Facebook Live, and on YouTube Live. Check us out.
The draw back to the point. Karlsson along the boards. Here's Duchesne. Side of the net. Centering pass. Hoffman scores! Hoffman walks into a stone feed, and Ottawa takes the lead.
Yes, that was the Ottawa Senators, and that was all they would need. 2 4-3 wins, 1 in overtime, 1 in regulation. They're 8-3-5. They're third in the Atlantic Division. and off to another strong start despite missing their best player for a pretty decent period of time early in the season. But he's back, and the Ottawa Senators are going right now. They don't play again until Thursday, so lots of time for the back-to-back wins in Sweden to sink in. With more on the Sens and their story, pleasure to welcome to the show from The Athletic. You can subscribe at theathletic.com. James Gordon is on the line. Hello, James.
Hi, how's it going?
I'm doing great. Thanks for making time for us here today. This Sweden thing. Now, before we get into the specifics of the NHL, and clearly, I mean, both teams I know have Swedish players. In this case of the Sens, some Swedish stars. What do you think the NHL is trying to accomplish in Sweden exactly?
Well, I mean, I guess they're trying to extend their footprint a bit and obviously get some of their biggest Swedish stars over there to maybe generate some more interest in the NHL game. Ottawa obviously has a few Swedish stars. First and foremost, Erik Karlsson, and obviously there's Gabriel Landeskog on the Avs. But it's tough to say long term what they're trying to do. Especially, I don't know if they're trying to make headway elsewhere in the world. Missing the Olympics this year has obviously been tough for them, and lots of people are talking about it. So, I think this maybe just gives the league a chance to get their product out there in different places and try not to cede too much ground there.
I wonder if there is anybody out there who's like, well, there was a couple of exhibition games in China, and plus there's 2 regular season games in Sweden. Like, who needs the Olympics? We've got that. I don't think so. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Sens, and they've had a busy, I mean, what a stretch. Wow. Crazy blockbuster trade earlier this week, then going international, getting a couple of wins. So let me start this with this, and I know you wrote about Matt Duchene specifically at The Athletic, James. How's Matt Duchene looking to you in the first couple of games in a Sens uniform?
Well, he was looking pretty good today. I mean, I think in the first game, and I saw their practices before they left, there was a lot of a couple of occasions kind of stopping practice, and Matt Duchene was on the bench, and Guy Boucher's running a drill, and he's stopping it so that they can give some explanations about how it works. And then, coming over to Ottawa after the trade and then flying to Sweden, I think he looked a little bit sluggish in his first game. And I mean, who wouldn't be after all that travel and upheaval and everything that goes with being traded. But today he looked much better. He looked like he had a lot more of his speed back, and he picked up his first point. The Senators were kind of struggling a little bit early on the power play, and then Guy Boucher went with kind of a lineup of death on the power play late in the game with Duchene, Karlsson, Brassard, Stone, and Mike Hoffman. And I mean, they scored the winning goal, and he looks like he's getting more comfortable day by day here.
Erik Karlsson has 17 points in 11 games. I don't know if it was possible for this guy to find another level after the season he had a year ago, and especially that playoff that he had a year ago. But has he managed to do that this year already?
I think the really kind of wild thing about it too is that if you don't watch him every game, you would look at those numbers and just see how quickly he's piling up points, and just be amazed at that. Just given where he is in the assist and points race, given he missed those games. But I mean, for people who've watched him here and watched him last year when he kind of hit his peak as a two-way player, he's quite a bit off that still. He's not quite as quick on his feet as he was last year, and you can tell he's still trying to get that quickness in his feet and turning around and sort of walking the line on the blue line and all that sort of thing. So he's not even at his, peak kind of form yet, if we're comparing to what he was last year. And I think as the season goes on, he'll get closer to that. And then, which is pretty crazy to think about if he can keep building on what he's already done this season.
And I'm curious about how quickly and to what extent Eugene Melnyk is. I mean, I'm sure this guy knows, and I'm sure Pierre Dorion has done his utmost to say, hey, listen, I mean, we got to basically give Erik Karlsson a blank check, right? They've been, and he's been probably criminally underpaid, really, based on the production he's had. And as soon as they can sign him to an extension this summer, they do kind of have to do it, right?
And he's not the only one there too. I mean, Mark Stone has something like 9 goals in 9 games here, and he's really proven himself to be one of the top two-way players, probably in the top 3, top 5 in the league right now. And now if he's adding this kind of goal scoring pace, which will taper off a little bit given what his shooting percentage is, but they got to worry about Mark Stone too, and Erik Karlsson, and then you've got Matt Duchene coming up in a couple seasons. So they're going to have to and Brassard too. So I think they're definitely a big part of what the Duchene trade was here was they feel that they have a Stanley Cup window. They went obviously to the Eastern Conference Final last season, and getting Matt Duchene is sort of a signal here where they're saying basically, this is our time. We're going for it. We're doing literally everything we can to try and get this team, over the hump into the Stanley.
2 minutes.
And in that process, if they keep having that success, that sends a message to an Erik Karlsson that, hey, we're building something special here, and we'll pay you, but also, we probably want him to want to stick around and see that there's a chance at long-term success here.
And I guess having a rink, or at least the some stability or a clear idea of if and when you're going to have a new rink, not in Canada but in Ottawa proper, that would probably help with that as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean that's a completely different story because I was asked about this earlier today too. The thing in Ottawa here is that it's not sort of the same situation that you had in Edmonton earlier and Calgary now, where you get all this kind of
1 minute
negotiating through the media and setting of timelines and deadlines and that sort of thing. Right now, the land that they want to build on is owned by the federal government, and it's run by a department called the National Capital Commission, and which runs a lot of stuff around the capital here. And it's really tough to get any kind of clarity about when if and when that's actually going to happen, because it's a very tight-lipped process, and there's consequences for
40 seconds.
So, you don't really even get a sense of when that's going to happen or if it's going to happen, even though they are kind of the main, bidders negotiating right now. So they made it sound early
30
that we'd be talking about a new rink in the, early 2020s, but you really never know how this thing's going to shake out when you're kind of dealing with the federal government, which, as everybody knows, isn't the fastest
15
dealing with this kind of stuff.
Thanks for your time, James. We appreciate it.
Yep.
That's James Gordon from The Athletic. Subscribe at theathletic.com. We're going to be back in just a few moments with the second hour of Hockey Primetime.
Whew, got out.
Good God.
Wow. I always get so stressed, and you always manage to get it right.
Well, that was I definitely rolled the dice asking him that question, but sometimes you got to do some crazy shit. All right.
I'm gonna. Sorry, I looked up some Alex stuff on my phone. So.
Oh yeah. But this is a guy I can just sort of throw anything at, right?
Yeah. He always he's the one that's super young and.
Yeah, I know.
I'm a huge fan of his work.
Hi, Rob is there.
Great, thanks. All right. Los Predatorios de Nashville. Oh no, Yahoo, no.
No, you have to hold on. Yeah.
It really goes by fast, I find. A show.
Yeah.
Which is, I think it's a good sign. What do I know?
I usually find I'm looking to make sure we still have time and not the other way around. You know, like.
Here we go, and Robert's on the line.
Great, thanks. NHL.com, right? Three, two, one. Hey, it's hour number 2. This is Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. We're on Facebook Live, on Periscope, and on YouTube Live. Please check us out. It's a video of us doing the show. My name's Conor McKenna, and Laura Sab is the producer of the show. She's here with me, and we're pleased to be able to hang out with you for another hour or so until we go over to coverage of, I should know this. Probably, I'm going to guess it's the Bruins and the Leafs, but
Buffalo, Montreal.
Oh, but no, it's Buffalo, Montreal. There you go. The Sabres and the Montreal Canadiens coming your way at 7 o'clock here on SiriusXM NHL Network Radio. So that's your Saturday night 7 o'clocker. And it should be fun. Nathan Beaulieu returning to Montreal. The emotions will be running high. Maybe not. We'll see. Speaking of emotions and returns to Montreal, we got to wait a while till PK Subban and the Predators come to Montreal this season. There was a lot of it in the building when he was there last year, and what a run by the Predators, falling just short of a Stanley Cup, and they kind of ran out of centers, didn't they? In the final, they ran out of centers, and now they have so many centers. I don't know if they know what to do with all these guys. The problem is the best one doesn't have any goals so far this year. With more on the Nashville Predators, let's talk to Robbie Stanley of NHL.com, covering the team in Nashville. How you doing, Robbie?
Connor, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for making time for us. We appreciate it. And this is a fun team to talk about. Fascinating, and especially with how David Poile has sort of become the most aggressive GM in the National Hockey League, landing significant player after significant player, whether it's in trades or through free agency. So let's go to the here and now. We haven't spent a lot of time on it so far today. How do you think the Predators did in the trade that landed them Kyle Turris?
I think they've done well. I mean, you look at the prospects they gave up in Samuel Girard, who's a defenseman I think can turn into a really good defenseman one day in the National Hockey League, and then Vladislav Kamenev, a forward that they had. It's two really good, exciting prospects in their system, and then a second-round pick as well. But I think if you're the Predators and you're taking a look at your roster right now and the window you have to compete for a Stanley Cup, it was a move that needed to be made. You just take a look at the forward group the Predators had this year. You've got Ryan Johansson and Forsberg and Victor Arvidsson, who have been a really good top line for you over the course of the past year. But as you mentioned earlier, Ryan Johansson hasn't scored a goal yet. You lose James Neal in the expansion draft, and you're hoping younger guys like Kevin Fiala and Pontus Aberg can step up offensively and help to replace the offense that Neal left behind. And so far, that just hasn't happened for this team. So you bring in Kyle Turris, a guy that not only can help you offensively by scoring goals, but I think can be a playmaker that to maybe help out guys like Fiala and Craig Smith, who he's been skating with the past couple of days. So it adds depth. They're probably as deep or more deep at the center ice position as they ever have been in the history of their franchise. And we saw how important that could be last year in the Stanley Cup Final. When you lose Ryan Johansson in Game 4 of the Western Conference Final, they never really recovered from that. And this year, I feel like they're in a much better position. If something like that happens again, whether it's in the regular season or down the stretch in the playoffs, they're better equipped to deal with that.
And both, Fiala suffered a sort of a devastating injury there. Speaking of injuries in the playoffs, and they were able to sort of weather that. And part of that was Aberg stepping up like he did in the postseason last year. When it comes to Fiala, is there any sense that maybe there's still some lingering effects of the injury, or that the recovery is just not yet complete, or why is it, do you think, he's having a hard time?
Yeah, it's really interesting because in the preseason, he looked really, really good. He was flying around. He was scoring goals in the preseason, had a very productive training camp. And at times he's looked very good in the regular season so far. There's still been some times where he's making plays for his teammates, but he's not shooting the puck enough. I mean, you take a look at the 14 games he's played so far, I think he's got 16 or 17 shots on goal. And that's something that has to get better as the season goes along. So I think for Fiala, sometimes less is more. I think there have been times this year where he's been pressing a little bit. He's trying to do too much and not just taking the play that's in front of him and making the shot and executing on the shot. So I think a guy like Carl Turris can come in, play with Kevin Fiala, and make sure that, if you got some room out there that you can create, maybe Fiala is more willing to take that shot now and the goals will start to follow. Because we've seen once he gets his confidence high so far in his career, once those pucks start to go in, they start to come in bunches.
Chatting with Robbie Stanley of NHL.com, talking Nashville Predators hockey. The Preds, after landing Kyle Turris in a trade earlier this week, are now going up the middle. What is it? Is it Johansson, Turris, Bonino? That's your 1, 2, 3?
That's the 1, 2, 3 when they're healthy. They're still not sure if Nick Bonino is going to be able to play tonight or not, but he is close. And I think once he's healthy, that 1, 2, 3 punch will be Johansson, Turris, and Bonino, and then probably Colton Sissons will be the fourth guy with Calle Yarncroc sliding to the wing. Not bad. All right. And with Sissons, a guy we saw really emerge there in the playoffs last year, one of many. So going back to Ryan Johansson, I'm curious because you mentioned the guys that he plays with. I mean, and those guys are no slouches, Victor Arvidsson and Philip Forsberg, but those are guys that love to shoot the puck, right? And I know, I guess there's only so many shots per line. You know what I mean? Like, I think what I kind of wonder about when I'm looking at that line is that I just don't know if there's enough pucks to go around for those three guys who all like shooting so much. Right, and that's an interesting point, and I think it's a valid one too, because if you look at Ryan Johansson's game, especially since he's come to Nashville, he's definitely a pass-first type of guy, and you can't really blame him, like you said, when you've got guys like Forsberg and Arvidsson on your wing. You take a look, since Ryan Johansson came to Nashville, he has less goals in that amount of time than he had in his career season in Columbus, where he scored 33 goals. So he hasn't really been scoring goals since he's come to Nashville. He's been driving the offense and making plays in other ways. He's been a very good distributor of the puck, and he's really helped Philip Forsberg and Victor Arvidsson emerge into the players they are. But I think when you just take a look at this roster right now, I do think that Johansson is going to have to shoot the puck a little bit more than he does. On the power play, he's been good on the half wall. He's distributed the puck very well. But I think on some of these 5-on-5 opportunities, he's passed up on some shots and tried to make that perfect play. And that's kind of been symptomatic of the Predators at times this year. They're playing well for the most part, but there have been times where they're just trying to make that perfect play. And Peter Laviolette this morning says they just need to shoot the puck sometimes and then try to go score those dirty, greasy goals around the net. And Johansson is a player who, whether fairly or not, has been criticized for his work ethic and other things that aren't necessarily related to his play on the ice. These things that may affect his play on the ice, but not necessarily just that. So I didn't really do a good job of saying what I just said, but hopefully you sort of get where I'm coming from. What I'm trying to say is, I know that there are still people out there, there's still fans and people in the media and all the rest of it that are skeptical about Ryan Johansson and whether he really is sort of 100% committed to being the best NHL player that he can be. And when a guy scores 0 goals in 15 games to start the season, that type of stuff gets amplified a little bit. This guy's he's paid, he's got a long-term contract, and that contract's guaranteed. What would you tell me if I were to suggest to you, and
I'm not saying this, I'm just being devil's advocate, that Ryan Johansson has kind of switched off now that he's been paid.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point, because I think a lot of people, like you said, Ryan Johansson has had that reputation throughout the course of his career so far. I wouldn't go that far right now. I still think the effort is there. I still think that he's driving to be the best player that he can be. But I do think there is another level to his game that he hasn't reached, because I've seen him reach it before. I mean, that first round series against Chicago last year in the playoffs was by far the best hockey he's ever played in his career. He was absolutely dominant against Jonathan Toews. Same thing in the St. Louis series. And really up until the point he went out of the lineup in the Anaheim series, he was playing by far the best hockey of his career. And it's very difficult in an 82-game season to expect that level of play from any player on a consistent basis from an 82-game each and every night. But I do think he needs to reach that type of level more often than he has so far this year. And if he does that, he's a player unlike the Predators have ever really had before at the center ice position. And David Poile in the offseason called him the driver of the Predators offense. And that's what he is when he's on his game. He hasn't quite been at that level anywhere near enough so far to start this season. And they've won games, and they've been able to kind of sustain their play even without that. If he brings that to their lineup, they're just a much more dangerous team. And when they're healthy, a very difficult team to beat.
How much are they missing Ryan Ellis?
I think they're missing him a lot. And I think they've done a pretty good job for the most part of handling his absence. They haven't been, these huge glaring mistakes and huge glaring defensive breakdowns without him. But Ryan Ellis is the guy. I mean, you've got so much star power on defense with his team, with PK Subban and Roman Josi and Matthias Ekholm. Ryan Ellis is the guy I think that kind of went under the radar until last year's playoffs, where everybody saw how good he is and what he can really do. I think he's a guy that does everything. He's very good on the power play. He plays, 22, 23, 24 minutes a night in all situations. So when he gets back, this Predators team, I think, is really going to be at full strength, and you can really start to see the identity of this team and where it could go potentially when the playoffs turn around. But I think they do miss him, especially on the power play. Their power play numbers have been really good at home. They've gotten some help with a couple 5-on-3s and even a 6-on-3 when they had a goaltender pulled at some point. When you shift it over to the road, it hasn't quite been as good, and they played 10 road games this year and only 5 home games. So they do miss Ryan Ellis a lot. I think his original timetable was to come back around the Christmas, New Year time. I think he's still on track to come back around that point, and that's going to be a huge boost for this team when they do get him back.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good Christmas present. A big bearded Christmas present
absolutely
in the form of Ryan Ellis. A big one tonight for the Predators as they host the Pittsburgh Penguins, a little Stanley Cup rematch action. And that's something to look forward to. I'll ask you about in a second. But you mentioned him. How's my boy PK Subban? I miss him here in Montreal. I think the city of Montreal misses him. I think a lot of Canadiens fans miss him. How's he doing so far this year? It seems like a lot less talk about PK Subban in the national media covering the NHL this year. Would you agree with that? And how does he seem to be doing so far this season?
I do agree with that, and I think in some ways that's been very good for Subban and for this team. And he's got 11 points so far. He's scored 3 goals. He's playing really well, being very productive offensively, and he's kind of bounced around a little bit as far as his defensive pairings are concerned. Last year, especially in the second half of the year, I mean, he was pretty much exclusively skating with Matthias Ekholm. This year, it's been Alexei Emelin for the most part. There have been times he skated with Sam Girard when he was still in the lineup. There have been times that he's played with Matt Irwin and Roman Josi. I mean, he's kind of bounced up and down the lineup, and I think he's handled it really well. He's been very good defensively. His breakout ability to lead the puck out of the zone and exit the zone has been really, really good so far this year. And like you said, it's been quiet. There hasn't been a lot of talk about PK Subban, but I think he's very quietly playing really, really good hockey for the Predators so far.
I tell you, the fact that PK Subban is playing with Alexei Emelin, it's amazing to me. I definitely thought I'd seen the last of that a couple of years ago, and now here we are again. All right, then, yeah, before I let you go, I mean, listen, I know how passionate the fans are down there, how fired up they get, but this one feels special tonight. It's a Saturday night game. It's the Stanley Cup champs. You can never get revenge for a Stanley Cup Finals loss, but are people fired up for this one tonight?
They're really fired up, and this has been circled on the calendar for a long time, ever since the schedule came out. And then you throw on the fact that it's going to be Kyle Turris' debut tonight. I think it's going to be a really special environment in Nashville, and the Predators fans have been tweeting me all day. They know about that second half of back-to-back records that Pittsburgh has. There's 0-4-1, and I think they've been outscored something like 31-8 in the second half of back-to-back. So the Predators fans are smelling blood tonight. We'll see how it takes place on the ice out there.
If Pittsburgh is a playoff team, they have like a minus 24 goal differential. It's insane, and it's all because of that. Hey, Robbie, a pleasure, man. Thanks for making time for us, and enjoy the game tonight.
Hey, I appreciate you having me anytime.
That is Robbie Stanley, NHL.com. I'm Conor McKenna, and I tell you, I feel like I wouldn't mind going to Nashville. I wouldn't mind going to Nashville and watching a hockey game. I wanted to do that last year in the playoffs, just to sort of drink in that atmosphere. So much fun, and what a great town. I had a great time down there a couple of years ago for All-Star Weekend, and I've been looking for an excuse to go back. Basically, my girlfriend's made me swear I will not go back to Nashville without her. She wants to go to Nashville, and with good reason. What a great spot. What a place to do a weekend, take in a hockey game. A lot of people talking about Vegas. Oh, I want to go to Vegas and do a weekend. I would hazard that Nashville, and it depends, of course, on what you're into. But if you are a music lover and all the rest of the stuff, the food, I mean, if you like barbecue and you like music, go to Nashville. I'm just telling you. If you like bottles, gambling, and spending a lot of money, go to Vegas. Coming up next, let's talk to Sean Gentili, our buddy from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We'll talk Penguins and go around the NHL with Sean. Coming up next here, this is Hockey Primetime on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio, and streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. Hello. Welcome back. It's Hockey Primetime here on SiriusXM, NHL Network Radio. It's game night. It's the Canadiens and the Sabres at 7 o'clock, live from the Bell Center in Montreal. You'll have Dan Robertson and Sergio Momesso on the Montreal Canadiens Radio Network broadcast, bringing you the call from, well, a place where there's been some mixed results so far this season. Now, hard to get a handle on this Canadiens team. They're like it's like the NFL. I have no feel for the NFL this year. Last year, I had a feel for the NFL. I had a pretty good feeling of what was going to happen game to game. This year, I got no idea. I can't get a feel for it. And as a result, doing a lot less gambling, which might be a good thing. Joining me now is a man who knows a thing or two about the National Football League and a Pittsburgh Steelers team, but because this is Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, we have to focus on hockey and perhaps 280 character tweets. His name is Sean Gentili. He covers sports for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Sean, how you doing?
Do we really have to focus on hockey? Is that necessary?
Well, sort of, yeah. Like I could get in trouble if we don't. Yeah. You seen Thor Ragnarok?
Yeah, I actually saw it yesterday.
And
it was really good.
It's great, eh?
I liked it.
Yeah,
I liked it. It was like a buddy cop with Thor and Hulk in space.
Yeah,
kind of like a buddy cop movie. It was awesome.
It was very fun. Okay, so listen, and this is sort of because a lot of people who cover hockey and are in hockey have Twitter accounts. A lot of players have Twitter accounts. What do you think of the 280 character transition? The fact that everybody now can make tweets that are twice as long as they used to be.
I think I've seen 3 or 4 good 280 character tweets. It's a disaster. The worst is that people are doing like the ironic 280 character tweets. They're trying to do it as a joke, and those are just uniformly bad. I think I hate those more than like the 165 character tweets. I'm trying to like limit myself to 140.
Me too.
In the name of in the name of integrity.
Yeah, in the name of all that is holy, you know. All right, good. So
Twitter. I mean, like seriously, the website is bad enough, and it's just doubled in badness.
Yeah. It's amazing. In one move, they made it twice as terrible. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the National Hockey League. The Penguins' latest loss, and this is the first in a back-to-back. Watch out. They got a big one coming up tonight against the Nashville Predators. Should be a fun game to watch. They lost 4-1 to the Capitals, a team that's a natural rival of theirs, and that's a rivalry game. Both teams sort of feel a little bit, at least so far this year, Sean, like they're not what they were. And we see a lot of that, though, in the Metropolitan Division in general, sort of a lot of mediocrity, it seems. What's your feel for this Penguins team 15 games into the season?
Yeah, man, that game last night was a dud, wasn't it? It wasn't very fun. I don't know. I think it's just sort of the natural. I just keep looking at it as sort of the natural byproduct of two consecutive cup wins. It's a mix of, you know, there's some miles on the tires there. They've had 2 really long seasons. They've played a lot of hockey, but also it's November, and it's a tough thing for them to get psyched up for at this point, even though they say otherwise. You know, that's all well and good, but you'd be lying if you said that these games meant as much to them as they've had in the past. So you throw in all that stuff, mix in some real issues with forward depth and backup goalie, and you're gonna have some problems.
Right, and Antti Niemi was that problem early on. Tristan Jarry comes in. This is a guy who's been in the organization for a while. The numbers are really good in a very small sample size. Do you think he can give them a little bit of stability?
You know, it was funny when they drafted him. It was the same year that they drafted Matt Murray. Jarry was their 2nd-round pick, and Murray was their 3rd. Or I think maybe they were both 3rd-round picks, and Jarry got picked ahead of him. Either way. You know, the early thought was, oh look, they picked a high profile guy in Jarry who had already been really good for the Wheat Kings and what have you. It was like he was the goalie of the future, and then Murray you know, developed so much more quickly than anybody could have guessed, and then ended up passing him up. But yeah, I think that's the move. I think that's what they have to do now, because you know, they had options. I think they should have taken a look at maybe Calvin Pickard when that situation was going on with Vegas and Toronto. But yeah, he's their best option. They have a lot of back-to-backs, and they have to have a decent backup goalie, if only for that reason, because they've still got 11 or 12 of them left on the schedule. Like they can't keep getting their brakes beaten off in the second half of these things. So they needed to figure something out.
And it's definitely going to. I would imagine that you know, those numbers will sort of even out over time, although this is not an easy game tonight, and it's going to be a hell of an atmosphere they're going into there in Nashville with Kyle Turris making his debut, and the fans are there are pretty sort of noisy to begin with. But you mentioned Matt Murray, and look, this guy's already got 2 Stanley Cups. It's crazy. I mean, what can you really say? But what's been going on with him? Well, why does he have? Is it just? I mean, is it back-to-backs? Is it just getting shellacked in those situations, or what is it? Why does Matt Murray have like a .905 save percentage?
I don't know. I don't have a good answer to that. I think part of it is that the team in front of him is worse. You know, it was a really pretty brutally beaten up defensive core for a little bit. At one point, you know, you had Schultz out, you had Matt Hunglick who's playing big minutes for them out. You know, you have Letang, who just has looked kind of lost in his first chunk of games since coming back from that neck injury thing. But no, I don't know. I think Murray's been so outstanding for the vast majority of his time really as a pro that you assume that things are gonna even out. But you know, he was the biggest thing he did last year was, you know, for as good as he was, he also covered up a lot of mistakes. Him and Fleury both during that playoff run. That was a much more flawed team than people realize. They relied on elite goal scoring ability and really, really good goaltending. So it makes sense that, you know, whenever they're getting, you know, mediocre goalie play rather than outstanding, that stuff's gonna go haywire on them. They rely on Murray to do a lot.
With Sean Gentile here in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, talking a little bit about the Penguins who play in Nashville. It's an 8 o'clock Eastern time start between the Predators and the Pens, little Stanley Cup rematch. Sidney Crosby, 10-game goal drought. Is Sidney? Here's the question on the tip of everyone's tongue. Is Sidney Crosby done?
Yeah. No, I don't know. I mean, come on.
Right.
I think it's we see this. Have we seen this like every season from him over the last couple? You know, he has an ugly month and pucks aren't going in the net. Everyone overreacts a little bit. I mean, at some point he is going to be done.
I know. You know,
but it's gonna happen in 6 years or whatever. He's not going to be old until he's actually old.
Right.
I have made the mistake before in wondering if Sidney Crosby had lost a step, and until it happens over the course of, you know, a season and a half, I'm not even going to entertain the thought.
Do you? I mean, you interact with a lot more Penguins fans than I do, and I'm sure read much more about the team than I do too. Has anybody suggested in this recent drought that Crosby is in that he is in fact done?
I've been looking out for it. That's funny. You know me well enough. I've been keeping a close eye on the Crosby takes. I literally haven't seen a single person suggest that he's past it. Because again, we've done this already.
Right.
And he's made everybody look so stupid several times in the past. So I think it's going to take more than 10 unlucky games for people to really go down that road because they've lost badly there before.
Yeah, I at least you'd hope so, and well, maybe he figures it out tonight. Who knows?
No, meanwhile, like as I say that, they're gonna lose tonight, and he's gonna have 0 points, and we're gonna get some scorched earth column from some clown here in a couple of days. It's very possible.
Well, and the best would be, let's be honest here, the perfect storm here that you forgot would be like he's also a -3 in the game, right? So you can add that to the mix that Crosby was a -3. You know, he was on the ice for an empty net goal at the end, which made it even worse because then, you know, it would have just been -2. You know, like that's the type of take I'm waiting for, and I hope you'll point me to it when it does appear.
It's going to be the fire barrel take to end all fire barrel takes. I'm psyched for it.
Hey,
it's probably going to happen at some point. But I'm telling you, I literally haven't seen one person suggest that yet.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. That gives me renewed faith in humanity. When it's been so shaken by so many things in the last little while. Hey, before I let you go, Sean, Is Phil Kessel a hockey Hall of Fame? Better quote, will Phil Kessel be a hockey Hall of Famer?
That's a great question. I say yes. I say it will be. And I always say yes when people ask the Hall of Fame question, really for anybody that's good, because there are too many people in the Hockey Hall of Fame as it is. So, like, if I started things from the start, like, would Phil Kessel be should he be a Hockey Hall of Famer? You know, like, based on the concept itself, like, probably not. But there are so many people in there who deserve it less than him. I think by the time it's all said and done, yeah, he might get in.
Huh. What about Braden Holtby? You think he's going to be a Hall of Famer?
I need him. He's very important to my fantasy team right now, so I'll settle for him. I'll settle for him having another good year.
He's very good. 200 wins he hit there yesterday against the Penguins. All right, Sean.
He is in the Beard Hall of Fame. Before it's all said and done, he will be in the Facial Hair Hall of Fame.
Well, better than no Hall of Fame, I guess, right?
Well, I mean, we'll see. I'm in neither, so it doesn't matter.
Hey, the night is young. Best of luck to you. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thank you for making time for us, Sean.
Absolutely, guys. Anytime.
That is Sean Gentili from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Always nice to check in with him and talk a little hockey and some other stuff here as well. Yeah, that Thor movie. I really do think I went and saw it this week. I think I saw it on Wednesday. And for me, I think it might be the best Marvel Studios movie. Listen, I know this is a hockey show, and we'll get right back to talking hockey in a moment, but I would imagine plenty of you listening are in the sort of Marvel Studios target audience and like your Marvel Studios films. And if you haven't seen it already, I'll give you, I think for me, basically, and I love that we're in the golden age of superhero movies, right? You think about anybody who grew up and sort of lived through the 80s and 90s, the superhero movies were bad. They were routinely bad. And right now, there's so many good superhero movies coming out these days. I love the Spider-Man, the latest Spider-Man Homecoming. I thought was very good. The first Guardians of the Galaxy was fantastic. I didn't like the second one as much. But I think right there, I mean, Thor, those might be my top three. But the Iron Man movies, the Captain America movies, the Avengers movies, I mean, there has been a lot of really, really good superhero movies, and there's been some really bad ones too. I have a feeling that Justice League might be a really, really bad one based on the way it looks right now. Coming up next, Alex Pruitt of Sports Illustrated. Let's go around the National Hockey League with our last guest of the show. The Coyotes, so bad. The Lightning, so good. I talk about some of the storylines surrounding those two teams and more next. This is Hockey Primetime on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio, streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com, on Facebook Live, on Periscope, and on YouTube Live. We talk to Alex Pruitt next. Welcome back to Talkie Primetime. Hope you're enjoying your Saturday. Teams are heading out on the ice for the warm-ups right now in the 7 o'clock games. And we're not too far away from puck drop, but we're going to have the Canadians and the Sabres for you here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. That's coming up in about, well, coverage will start in about 25 minutes. They'll take you to the Bell Center. Puck drop's probably going to be closer to about 7:15 tonight. It's a Hockey Night in Canada game. The Leafs face the Bruins tonight. I think the game of the night's got to be the Penguins, who are looking to exercise those back-to-back demons and going into Nashville, going back to the scene of the crime from what was a memorable and excellent Stanley Cup final 1 year ago. But plenty of games to look forward to and plenty of storylines around the National Hockey League that we're looking at and want to talk about with our next guest. His name is Alex Pruitt with Sports Illustrated, covering the National Hockey League. Alex, welcome back. How you doing?
Good. You?
I'm very well, thanks, and thanks for making time for us here this evening. So where to begin here? I wanted to start. Let's start with the bad news first, okay? The Arizona Coyotes, and they do have one nice storyline going on that I know you wrote about in Clayton Keller. But are you as shocked as I am that they're as bad as they are this year? I thought this was going to be kind of a step in the right direction season for them.
Not when you consider that their starting goalie has been out for most of the year. I'm not terribly surprised. I mean, they couldn't get a save there for a couple games. I had a chance to see him in a couple when they swung through New York, and that was the big issue then. I think they feel pretty good about getting Wedgwood in that trade from Jersey to shore up the backup spot, and then once Rondo's come back, he's been a steady presence, which I think they thought he could be. But obviously they have an uphill climb. And that said, this year I don't think was necessarily going to be about making the playoffs. I know a lot of us maybe got ahead of ourselves when we looked at the roster and looked at the improvements that they made. But it's still a very young group that has a lot of growing to do. And John Chaika there and Rick Tocchet, they're kind of playing the long game in that. And it was interesting just to see Rick up close and kind of the way he handles this group. And it's, all positivity and all, taking the young guys aside during skates and talking to them and coaching them, because that's how you get better. But yeah, as far as Keller goes, 11 goals, which is I think 4 more than any other rookie, 17 points, which is 3 more than any other rookie. He's been absolutely stellar for them, probably their best player. Max Domi's had a ton of chances, but he hasn't buried them, and that's what Keller's done. A couple of little nifty moves, picking the pocket of Fischer that one night, and spinning around in the offensive zone and beating Schneider, a couple other goals. He's shown real prowess around the net, which is probably surprising when you look at his size. And he also seems to have a really keen sense. I mean, he's playing almost 20 minutes a night right now against some tough competition that's, looking to feast on a team that's a little bit down, and he's certainly acquitted himself well.
What about Dylan Strome? What were they saying about him, who I think a lot of us had sort of hoped that he would be, this might be it. This might be his sort of breakout rookie season, and that hasn't happened. What are they saying about him and where he's at?
Have not dug around that. Was writing that thing on Keller.
All right. We're talking to Alex Pruitt of Sports Illustrated.
Wish I could offer you something more there.
That's all right. I'd rather you're, it's better to be honest than to, make something up. Right? I mean, that'd be terrible. Fake news. People talk about that all the time. All right, let's talk about the best team in the NHL so far this year. Tampa Bay has been so good. Steven Stamkos is on 30 points, and who'd have thought, right? When Stamkos was at one point, he sort of, in a way, eclipsed Alex Ovechkin briefly as the preeminent goal scorer in the National Hockey League, and now he's almost like more of a playmaker. The evolution of Stamkos has been fascinating to watch, hasn't it? And dealing with all those injuries and bouncing back so strongly this year.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, we forget last year he was off to a scorching pace as well. He had 20 points through 17 games before he got hurt. I think he had 9 goals there too. And the assist number is doubled. That's what it is at this point. Through 17 games now, he has 22 assists and he has 10 more points because of it. 1 fewer goals. I mean, that line has been unstoppable in Nemestikov and Kucherov, and they're just so much fun to watch. I mean, what they did the other night, the quick strike ability that team has, it's one of the better tickets in the league to watch right now. You certainly feel for Stamkos because of the crap luck he's had in the past with the blood clots, and then what he went through last year, and he's had a couple injuries. I mean, this is a guy who pretty much through his first, I think, 5 seasons in the league, including pretty much ending with a lockout year, he only missed like 3 games. I think he had a pretty good run there. I think 3 straight 82 game season and the 48 one. So he's had a kind of uphill battle. You have to commend a guy for fighting through that. And it certainly seems like, I mean, not just them, but the entire team. Like they've got their mojo, and they're right back where they were in 15 and 16 when they made those runs, and everyone thought they were probably poised for another one of those last year, and then injuries derailed that. But you're seeing what they're capable of when they're healthy.
What do you think it says? I found this to be sort of fascinating because I consider Tampa to be sort of a model franchise as far as how they do their business, drafting, developing, trades, and all the rest of it. Steve Yzerman, Julien Brisebois, John Cooper, just good, smart hockey people doing good things. And I find it interesting that I count me among those who was like, oh man, Dan Girardi, this guy, New York Rangers, it's crazy. It was crazy when he got the contract he got. Then he got bought out. What does it say when a team that is considered, I'm not alone in thinking that Tampa is, this great organization, that they wanted Dan Girardi? What does that sort of say about the disconnect that still sort of exists between hockey people and sort of numbers people?
I don't know. Well, it's all relative to value, right? I mean, you get Dan Girardi at 2 years for $3 million. That's a lot different than 5 years or 6 years at $5.5 million with a bunch of protection on his stuff. I think he has a no trade clause now as well, but I mean, relatively, I think low risk in the grand scheme of things, but you can make those kinds of moves because, as you mentioned, Steve Yzerman and his staff there have done a pretty remarkable job managing the cap. I mean, Tyler Johnson is locked up for the next foreseeable future at a very manageable $5 million. Kucherov is going to get paid, but for now he's 2 years and under $5 million, which, I mean, if this kid leads the league in goals this year, that's a pretty remarkable deal to have, which it seems like he's certainly capable of. I mean, Hedman locked up. He's certainly one of the top 5 defensemen in the league at this point. He's just under $8 million, but you got him for the long term as well. So, I mean, they know what they have, and they know what their core is, and that allows them to fill pieces in. At the same time, you're also not really asking Dan Girardi to shoulder as big a load as he's had in the past. I think below 17 minutes at this point per game. So, I mean, Hedman's your workhorse, and you have Strawman there capable of doing that, and some useful pieces down below. Sergachev has been outstanding. I mean, what a great pickup there. I think as everyone probably suspected he would be. Maybe not this soon as a 19-year-old, but you're getting quality minutes from a rookie like that. I mean, we've seen with Pittsburgh in the past. That's how you win. Is you fill in the gaps with young, cost-effective players who are able to contribute, but at the same time, you also have your horses carry the load, and they have those pieces.
We're talking to Alex Pruitt of Sports Illustrated. We've touched on the worst team in the NHL so far this year and the best team in the NHL, starting with the Coyotes and moving on to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are doing some good things. And you make a lot of good points there. And in particular, Dan Girardi not playing first pairing minutes is a totally different story, right? And makes all the difference in the world. There's so much of, I guess, a player evaluation is tied to how that player is being used and how much money that player is making. And as you point out, both of those things have changed now that he's a member of that Tampa Bay team. And I'm sure he couldn't be happier with the situation. All right. What about the Washington Capitals? That was a big win last night. I know they get the 4-1 win over the Penguins. But both teams, right, who have been really sort of the two powerhouses of the Eastern Conference, playoff success notwithstanding, for years and years and years. But they're kind of mediocre so far this year, just like almost every team is in that Metropolitan Division. How much of a step back, if at all, have the Capitals taken this year?
A step back, but everyone thought they would. Everyone knew they would. I mean, that's what happens when you go for it like they did with 2 years. Their GM, Brian McClellan, who, commend him for his honesty on this, he basically said that they have a Stanley Cup hangover without actually winning the trophy. When you trade a bunch of stuff for Kevin Shattenkirk, you have a bunch of UFAs who get pulled off, and like Karlsson, he goes away, and Nashimake gets picked in the expansion draft, and Justin Williams is gone, and because of some of the guys you had to lock up long term, like Kuznetsov and Oshie, as a result, you have to trade Marcus Johansson. So, I mean, this was always coming. I think that they knew at some point they were going to have to jettison, say goodbye to some of their core, or at least some of their important members of the supporting cast. And they were going to have to rely on depth pieces, or, kids coming up from the minors who haven't had a lot of playing time. And they've sat there for a while and they've incubated for a while, and that was the model that they wanted to go off of. They wanted guys like Madison Bowie and Christian Juice and Chandler Stevenson and Nathan Walker and et cetera to get time in Hershey. And, again, like with Pittsburgh, it had in the past, with guys like Gensel and Rust and Sheary and Kuhnackel and people coming up and being able to contribute from the minors. Washington certainly banking on the same. So I think everyone there knew that there was going to be a bit of a step back. At the same time, they certainly have the talent to be able to compete again. But they need a lot of pieces to fall into place. And right now, like you said, a lot of teams are pretty average. I think there's 5 teams in that Metro that are either at 20 or 19 points right now, and then a couple other at 18. So, who knows what's going to happen. Still very early. They've been way more banged up. I think they were the healthiest team in the league last year. And, their number one defenseman, Niskanen's been out. And Burakovsky, a guy who was supposed to take a big leap this year offensively with Johansson gone, he's been hurt. And, Brett Connolly, who was a very important piece of their depth scoring last year, has been hurt. So, once these guys get healthy, let's check back later. And that's kind of the attitude it is, right? Probably with here and Pittsburgh, is they've been there before. They can turn it on. They know as long as they hang around, they got a shot.
You mentioned that logjam in the Metro, where you do have 3 teams with 20 points right now. So that's 1, 2, 3. The Devils, the Rangers, and the Penguins. 4, 5, or in the wild card spots, you've got Columbus and Washington. And where there's Philly, there's the Islanders knocking on the door at 18 points. So yeah, crazy sort of not disparity, but parity there. Who do you think? If you had to today, and I understand predictions are sort of what they're worth, but who do you think is going to end up in that number 1 spot? Say if it is going to be one of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, one of those 7 teams, who would you pick today?
I would probably Pittsburgh or Washington, just because they've been there before, but I think it's going to be way closer than it has been in the past. Washington ran away with the President's Trophy these past 2 years. It wasn't really close. So, just based on their track record, based on the fact that their big guys are still there, I would say probably one of them. But like you said, it wouldn't shock me if Columbus is there, or if the Rangers string it together. If they get good goaltending, and it seems like they've really found something with that Shea Shattenkirk pairing right now, and they're getting the depth scoring they need from guys like Vesey and Bushnevich. If that continues, then you could see them right there. Even Carolina is the last place team in that division right now, and they're only 5 points back at 15 points, and they played 4 fewer games than Pittsburgh and the Rangers. And I think everyone's pretty positive about some of the young guys they have there, especially on the back end, and wouldn't be surprised if they made a run too. So, honestly, yeah, cast a 6-sided die at this point, or a D8. Who knows?
Yeah, and it should be fun to watch. It'll keep it interesting for sure. And yeah, I hope Carolina figures it out. I picked them to make the playoffs. Not feeling good about it right now. Alex, thanks for your time, man. We really do appreciate it.
No problem. Take care.
That's Alex Pruitt of Sports Illustrated. This is Hockey Primetime here on Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. My name's Conor McKenna with Laura Saba, the producer of the show. I'll be back to wrap things up next. I'm bringing back the winners and losers segment this week. I got some winners and losers. We got some listener questions we'll get to before we send it over to the Bell Center for coverage of the Habs and the Sabres, which is what's coming up right after this. But we'll wrap things up right after this. This is Sirius XM NHL Network Radio. The show is streaming live at hockeyprimetime.com. You can find it on our Twitter via Periscope at Hockey Primetime. You can like us on Facebook. The show is called Hockey Primetime, and so is the Facebook page. And we're even on YouTube Live. There's so many ways to watch us, so please take advantage. We'll wrap things up right after this. Hello. Final moments of the show. We got about 5 minutes to go. We're going to try to make the most of them before we turn it over to coverage of the Habs and Sabres. I'm Conor McKenna. This is Hockey Primetime. Hello. How's your day going? How's your weekend going? It's cold here in Montreal. It is. It feels like winter is sort of coming, and my feet are a little bit cold right now, if I'm being totally honest with you. See, I'm having a tough time. So let's get warmed up here. What do we have going on before we get to winners and losers this week? I wanted to get to some listener questions from our Facebook page, I think. So let's start here. Eugene says, hello from Perth in Western Australia. Go Blues. Well, Eugene, I did not know that there was a lot of Blues fans in Western Australia, but I am pleased to hear it, and I thank you for listening to the program, and I hope you have a good one. James writes, when do you think the Blues will come down from the stratosphere? Hard to say. I don't know if I'm looking at the Western Conference. What do we have going on right now? It's a little bit weird, right? The Blackhawks are not the powerhouse of the conference the way that they once were. The San Jose Sharks are a good but no longer a great team. I remember the Sharks were sort of a perennial powerhouse in the West that would usually disappoint in the playoffs. They're good. They're still good, but they're not, they're not what they were. The Kings have been a surprise. They've been better, although maybe they're coming down to earth. How about what the Tampa Bay Lightning did to them the other night, to going into L.A., beating them 5-2, a little bit of a statement game to go on the road and do that, especially an Eastern team doing it to a Western team. So I look at those teams. The Blues are good, and they surprised a lot of us. I think we know the Blues are going to be good. They're always good, but they have been the best team in the Western Conference so far this year. And are they, though? They're the Blues. Is this a Stanley Cup team? They've had, much like the Sharks, for years and years and years, the kind of roster that appears good enough to win a Stanley Cup, but often disappoint in the playoffs. So around and round we go. But I guess the fact is I think you can make a case for virtually any team, and not virtually any team, but for many teams out there in the Western Conference, that maybe this team could come out of the West. I think it's going to come down to, and I think that they could easily be a conference finalist. The Blues, it's going to come down to Jake Allen, just like it always does. And if Jake Allen can be better than whomever it is that he's going up against in the other crease, then maybe this is the year for the Blues. Although I don't know if I like anybody's chances if it's going to be Tampa Bay in the final. That's just a really nice team. And when it comes to the Lightning, it's funny because we hear so much, and Sean Gentili was saying this about the Pittsburgh Penguins, 2 consecutive Stanley Cup runs, that takes a toll. And, well, what about the Lightning? They missed the playoffs last year. What effect does that have on all of these guys and their ability to bounce back? They didn't play in the playoffs. They didn't even go one round. So they had a nice long summer to get ready and to rest up, and now here they are tearing it up so far this year. So that's my answer to your question about the Blues. I don't know. I don't know if the Blues are going to come down from the stratosphere. I think they could be the best team in the Western Conference. All right. Daniel says, how does the Metro finish this year? With 4 teams sitting in 1 and 2 is going to continue to be super tight? I don't understand the question. I thought I did, but now I don't.
I feel like you addressed that, though, with both Alex Pruitt and Sean Gentili,
so,
about how tight the division
I think there will be 5 teams from the Metro and only 3 from the Atlantic. Winners and losers. All right, here's something, okay? I got a pet peeve. Now, Nashville hosts Pittsburgh tonight. Pittsburgh won the Stanley Cup. They beat Nashville in the Stanley Cup final last year. Can we not say Nashville is looking for revenge or looking for payback in this game tonight? A definite pet peeve of mine in the media. There's no revenge for somebody beating you in the Stanley Cup final except beating them in the Stanley Cup final. In game 17 of the regular season, nobody's getting revenge for a 7-game loss in the Stanley Cup final. It's just not happening. The Rangers, 6 straight wins right now. Kevin Shattenkirk's playing some good hockey. He's got a nice thing going with Brady Shea there on the blue line. Winners this week, 6 wins in a row. And you know what? I think the biggest winners of all are the fans. So we got that massive trade. This time last week, we were talking about, it would have been so cool if that trade had happened. And then the trade happened. It was awesome. Nashville got better. Ottawa, I guess, got better. I don't know how much better I think Matt Duchene is than Kyle Turris. We'll see. But lots of fun hanging out with you today. Well, I love talking hockey with you guys. Please join us again next week. This was Hockey Primetime, and you can check us out at hockeyprimetime.com.